Okay, can you still see you?
Yeah. So it
Okay.
says recording started. By attending this meeting, you consent to being
Yeah,
recorded.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's all standard, but for some reason I can't see your face. But if you can see you, it means
I
it's
can
still
see me.
broadcasting.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's
which
just that.
means, all right, brilliant. Right, so, hi everybody, salut tout le monde. So we have a slightly different video today. Alors on a une vidéo un peu différente aujourd'hui. So this is Fiona. She's an absolute legend and a friend of mine. Okay, so the interview will be in English so that you guys can follow and it doesn't make it doubly long. So first things first, Fiona has an absolutely gorgeous flat in Montpellier, which is available for rental, with or without maybe some accompaniment with a language tuition side, being shown around, whatever, she's available for that. There's a finance option for that, and that is something you can discuss with her. So loads of you always contacting me saying, Luke, where do you recommend I go? I want to spend a little bit of time in France, I want to practice my French. This is a fabulous person. This is a fabulous location, gorgeous family, gorgeous central position, loads of art, loads of transport links, loads of gorgeous local nature. So if you're just after a safe location to spend a bit of time in France with somebody who's on hand, who obviously speaks both languages, then I cannot recommend somebody more than Fiona. But we're going to talk today, and the information for that I will make available. I will pop the link in the description box underneath. If anybody's a little bit insecure, you can message me privately and I will give you Fiona's details. But the website and the ability to contact Fiona will be in the description box underneath. But today, to get to how this situation, to how we've got this situation going on in Montpellier, we're going to talk about how Fiona, who was living in England with a rather gorgeous job and a gorgeous husband and a gorgeous children, and how she ended up living in France. Because many of you obviously are learning because you want to spend time in France, be it full time, be it for like a year abroad, be it for a family move, be it for a job move, whatever. This all happened at the same time as COVID. This was a nightmarish situation. So a lot of you were kind of like, oh, I don't think I could ever have the courage. My dream is to live in France, but there's so much paperwork to overcome. Wait until you hear how this Boadicea, this Boudica, this Celtic warrior, dealt with the shit and got herself over to France with her family and the whole story. So I'm going to basically ask Fiona some questions. So it shows it's doable. It shows it's completely doable. Right, Fee. So if you could just start by telling us, what were you doing before all of the French thing happened? What were you doing for work? Where were you? What was Matt doing? Tell me the whole setup.
So I was theatre manager at rugby school. So rugby school is probably one of the most prestigious independent schools in the UK, where fees are probably about 37,000 a year. That was then, so it's probably gone up. And my job was to open the theatre to the community. So the theatre had just been the sole purpose of the pupils that could afford it. And my job was to open up that theatre to the community. So I've always worked in theatre producing my whole life, and I'm very passionate about bringing arts to people that wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to explore it. So that's what I was doing. 3 children. Roisin was in one school. I have twin boys who are in a different school.
How old were they at this time?
So Roisin was year 5. Yes, she was year 5 because she was supposed to be going, we were working towards the 11 plus because obviously that's the next school. So that was the idea of work towards the 11 plus to get into, a grammar school the following year. And the boys were year 1. So they were like...
So for Americans watching, that would make them how old?
So the boys were 7 and Roisin was 10.
Brilliant.
And so they've never spoken a word of French.
And so you've obviously got a background speaking French educationally, but at this point in time, other than family holidays, did you have any particular goal or desire to relocate the whole family to France at this point in time when everything was tickety-boo?
God, no. Not at all. Obviously everybody has, because I lived in France, and because I knew that I loved doing that, I would have loved my children to have that opportunity, but it was never something that was on the cards. It was like, something for the future, maybe you think about. But at the day to day, I'm a full-time working mom, dropping children off activities. Matt's an international cellist and an opera singer, so he's touring all over the world. We're like ships in the night, dealing, but surviving, not thriving, definitely surviving, just about. And then COVID happened.
Hashtag relationship honesty. Hashtag relationship honesty. Yeah.
And
So then what happened?
so then COVID was announced, and immediately all of Matt's work just pings. All these emails kept coming in going, because of COVID, your gigs are cancelled. And so Matt was the main breadwinner. So I thought, oh my God, what are we going to do? It's okay. I still have a job. We'll struggle. This is only be temporary. We don't know how, none of us knew how long COVID was going to last.
We had no idea.
No idea. So I thought, that's okay, that's okay. And then the next thing came was the government furlough scheme. And because the theatre had to be shut because of COVID, I was then put on a furlough scheme, which is still good because I can't physically, but I could be planning future stuff when the world reopens again. But I was put on this furlough scheme. And then within a couple of months, I got this request for a Microsoft Teams meeting with HR, where they basically just dismissed me. They ended my contract. So at that, I mean, I was so shocked.
Because having ploughed all your love and energy and fees, music, and opportunities for the future and funding that you'd found and successful, venture capitalism, all of this, and basically
they were holding on to that money and choosing, obviously, to get rid of me, but to hold on to that money until the world reopened because they didn't need me anymore.
Yeah. Because on a side note, if anybody watching this for their French is involved in anything of that nature, and you need someone on a consultancy level who just gets arts admin and arts funding and basically launching this kind of stuff, you can't do better than Fiona. She has got a fabulous CV.
Yeah, so, I mean that's been my whole life, just doing applications, fundraising, putting on gigs, putting on events.
This is the point. This changed your life. So what then led you to the decision, shit, Matt, we need to go to France?
So Roisin was in an independent school. So she was in a fee-paying school. Now, of course, she was at home online learning, so she wasn't going into school. But by this point, we knew that she could never go back to that school. So financially, we were so buggered. And that would mean her changing to another school for 1 year before going to another school. Yeah. And I said, I'm struggling with this. I'm really struggling. For her mental health, this is not going to be great. Already we're in this situation. How can we get the best out of this shit situation? Yeah. And we couldn't even afford our mortgage. So we had no income then coming in. The furlough thing was up until however long it was, but then beyond that, there was no income coming in. No. So I said, we need to take like massive action, take a radical plan to do something where the children don't understand how shit their life is at this point in time. What can we do?
Because everything else, and I think this is what's really important. And when people are considering a move, often they think in terms of, upscaling or downscaling, but it's like different scaling, isn't it? So it's kind of like you're sort of saying, look, if literally within the situation that we were in, things would have been harder, we wouldn't have had the same disposable income, the same quality, inverted commas, of life. And you're basically saying, look, let's turn that into something new. And so basically, there's never a perfect time. And I always say this to people that want to go and spend some time abroad. There's not always ever a perfect time. But you took the fact that it was going to be hard and we're like, well, we might as well do something new with the difficulty, which I think is fabulous. So go on then. So how did that then?
So then I looked at selling the house because we were desperate. So I got the house on the market to sell. And because it was
COVID. Did you try to sell Matt first? No, did that not go down?
No, the cello, no buyers for the cello. So tried to get the house up for sale. The house was up for sale. There were no viewers because it was COVID. Yeah. And so, and then, then Matt was getting apprehensive. And I said, look, if we don't sell the house, what about we rent it? And then with the money that we get from the rent, we then pay our mortgage, and whatever's left, that's our budget to rent somewhere. And let's pick France because, I could speak the language. Matt did it to A level, but because he's a singer, he often sings in different languages. So he's very good at languages. Yeah. And I said, and I did my Erasmus year in Montpellier. Why don't we try Montpellier? That's a place I know.
Okay.
So then, of course, I'm
Just for the
looking.
uninitiated, I mean, literally, there will be people watching who, with no disrespect, want to spend some time in France, but literally might not even be that familiar with the sort of geographical layout of France. So
Yes.
where is Montpellier? What does it access? What is it near? You know,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about Montpellier.
So Montpellier is the youngest, most youthful town, city in France. Okay, so the average age is 25. So you can imagine when I did my Erasmus year there, it was rocking. We had a most amazing time. Montpellier is, so it's 50 minutes door to door from here. It's 2 hours from Barcelona on a train. You've got airports that fly to Paris, London, Manchester sometimes, Birmingham, often changes, you know, depends on the year. Even Sweden, it goes to Sweden.
Yeah.
Train routes to Paris, you can get the TGV to Paris, doesn't take any time at all, maybe 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's got an opera house. It's got an international dance festival. You must know that, that we went to last year. It's a pedestrianised town. It's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning.
So did you aim for Montpellier itself,
Yes.
or budget-wise, did you sort of look around, or where did you find
Well, obviously Montpellier initially, and then Montpellier. The prices of Montpellier have gone through the roof since, you know, I was there 20 years ago. So then
the dream,
yeah, and obviously I didn't have 3 children, and I thought I can't live in a flat without any outdoor space.
No.
So then the search area gets larger and larger and larger, and then I came across a little town called Pézenas. Okay, so Pézenas is 10 minutes from where we are now.
Yeah.
Pézenas is where Molière, who's considered the French Shakespeare,
Yeah.
lived. Okay, so where we lived in England was very close to Stratford-upon-Avon. So
That's a gorgeous link. I didn't know
Isn't
that.
it? Yeah.
Gorgeous link.
I came across Pézenas and I'm looking at all the stuff and I'm going, oh my God, it's a sign. We need to live in Pézenas. This is a sign.
Yeah.
And but Pézenas again was too expensive. So then I looked at the villages around and came across this village called Co, which is where we are now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I had €950.
If anybody wants to follow the story and look on the map, we're talking CAUX, is that correct?
Yes, CAUX, and Pézenas, P-E-Z-E-N-A-S.
Good, okay.
And so then I found a website, I think it was called Languedoc Rentals. And I
Just what it says on the tin.
it says on the tin. And I found this holiday gîte, that was for €950.
Okay.
And I emailed and said, is it available?
So let's do this stage then. So basically, if somebody were looking to, let's make this absolutely clear. So one of the reasons why people who do what Fiona does in terms of offering this accommodation, which can be, you know, more than sort of a few days to a week, it can be longer. One of the things that's great about this is, as you'll hear from the story, is France is, and I'm fairly sure if somebody's learning French and has had any experience with France, they would know that France is famous for, you know, even acknowledged within France, red tape on an administrative level.
Yeah.
There's a lot of certificates required. There's a lot of financial stuff that needs to be in place. There's a lot of paperwork that needs to be in place for the rental, let alone the buying of a property. So one of the things that's often an obstacle for people to go to spend some serious time in France, other than doing it the hotel way, which is useless, or the youth hostel way, which is not really ideal, is the admin, as you know, basically you're saying. But one of the great things about your flat is obviously that is taken care of, because you've got somebody that, you know, so you've got the opportunity to live a lifestyle of somebody who wants to spend, you know, a good couple of weeks, whatever, to a month or whatever in France. But you haven't got all the red tape because that's been taken care of. Really, you know. That's fabulous. Yeah.
Well, so we couldn't. There's no way we could have rented a place if we'd gone through the French system.
No, exactly.
No way.
No.
So I found this place, and then I had this piece of paper that was like a wallpaper liner on the kitchen table, right? And in the middle, I had moving to France, and it was like a spider diagram with all these arms coming off going, how do I open a bank account? How do I get school place? Where to live? Brexit. This was 2 months before Brexit. Okay, so the first thing I did in COVID is apply for my Irish passport. That was that, you know, my parents are Irish and I didn't have a passport, so I quickly got that in because I thought at least, you know, Matt doesn't, and the children are eligible for it, but they haven't got it yet.
No.
So how do then you apply for, it's called a titre de séjour, so a permit, a resident permit is what we need to apply for.
So pardon me, so basically if someone was watching and they've made this decision, and this might be something that you do after having had an experience like staying with someone like Fiona in that flat, and then you've decided that actually you'd maybe like to do this a little bit longer term, then what is very, very useful is somebody like Fiona that basically, you know, for like a fair price, you can basically take on as a sort of, you know, a guide to this process. So what is absolutely, there's nothing like experience. There's nothing more important than a recommendation, and there's nothing more important than experience. So if somebody says, I want to move to France, and you look at websites and you try and do that the kind of traditional way, it does often get a little bit blocky. And if you've got someone who's friendly and articulate like Fee, who can basically say, right, well, you're going to need this. Don't worry about that. They make a big deal out about that, but you can do that. Right, you're going to need to do this. If you've got kids, you'll need to do that. That is something else that basically Fiona would be fabulous for. So if you are genuinely looking at this kind of move and you want someone to kind of timeline, and I think you can glean people from the work that Fiona has done before, the organizational skills that she has. If you are after somebody to kind of advise you on this kind of move, you know, obviously paid and remunerated, Fee is fabulous at that because she knows on a calendar level what you need at different points. And that includes the children thing, and that includes moving stuff across, moving furniture across, all of the things that you just go, yeah, it's great, we've got this dream, but how do we make that happen? So that's just another thing that Fiona is, you know, something you can contact her for. So you had your spider diagram. So what happens next?
And I was ticking stuff off. I'd chip away at various things, and I joined loads of Facebook groups. So things like ladies in Languedoc, expats in France, and I asked loads of questions like, how do I get?
Can we just enjoy the alliterative brilliance of ladies in Languedoc?
There's also ladies in Pézenas and their lips.
I think that should be like pute de Pézenas or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Or pétasse de Pézenas would be a bit more curt.
Yeah. So, and I asked loads of questions, and there was somebody on maybe an expat in France group who said, if you would like me to go and check out, because I asked what Co was like as a village, because I'd found this place. And if you would like me to check out this place in Co, we actually have a mutual friend. So that's the power of social media, okay? That there are connections that have popped up. And it turns out that this guy who lives in another village was sacked during COVID from the international school in Paris. He was the headmaster.
Imagine losing your job from a school, goodness. Yeah.
And he was back in his home in Fougères, which is a village, you know, whatever, 20 minutes away. And he said, I'm really happy to go and check out this accommodation for you. And the mutual friend we have is somebody called Pippa. And Pippa turns out to be my daughter's singing teacher. So I quickly asked Pippa and said, who's this person? And she said, oh no, he's a great friend. So then became really good friends with him. And he went to the village and to the house, met the landlady for us, gave us a FaceTime tour of the village, checked out the where the school was. There were, you know, said there were 2 boulangeries, there's a shop. And he said, this seems like a great place as a temporary little home.
And with that going on, and I'm sure people planning this kind of thing, whether it's just a short trip or whether it's like a longer trip, would get this. Was there a moment in yourself then when you went, do you know what, we can do this? We can do this. Like when did you sort of go from surviving on the dream and the hope and that we've got to do this to, do you know what, this is actually doable? Like, was there a sort of change where you thought?
I think probably that felt like a sign that there was somebody, and he was really helpful. And I felt more confident that I wasn't just going to rock up to this place and it was all legitimate. I think that probably cemented that. Yes.
Yeah. And knowing he was there, or you had someone locally there as well, was that helpful?
Exactly. So she said he will be really helpful, and he was really helpful in the sense that me and the children ended up arriving 2 weeks before Matt did. Yeah. And he picked us up from Montpellier Airport. Yeah. Because I had no transport, drove us to the accommodation, then took me to the supermarket to do a food shop.
But let's just make this clear. So where you turn up first of all, if I got this correctly, was an Airbnb for a week and then another
Yeah.
week. Is this right? So this isn't the information side of this video. This is just that, isn't this impressive? So you turn up with your beautiful daughter and your two beautiful twin boys in tow, none of them speaking French yet, turn up with them minus husband, childcare with one, let alone the three.
Yeah. And the heat. You have to imagine the heat
and the
in August.
And you are where most of civilized France has evacuated and gone to somewhere with a swimming pool.
Yeah.
And you are then living in an Airbnb rental that you did not know what you were going to get to. And this was for a week. And then, if I'm not mistaken, you then had a second one for the second week. Is that correct?
Well, for the first week we were somewhere, and the day, so basically I rocked up and said to the landlady, because she didn't quite understand
the situation.
We were planning that I was planning to send the children to school, because I think a lot of people come over with their children and carry on doing a curriculum in their country, so online. Okay. But this wasn't. I wanted, full integration.
Yes.
So I said to the landlady, do you know how I get the children into the school? And she kind of, what? Given that school was starting in 2 days. And she said, well, you need to go to the town hall. You need to go to the mairie, and you need to, bring your dossier. And
can you imagine if, for example, it was something like, I mean, it wasn't, but can you imagine if there was something like, oh yeah, you needed to have done this by tell that, and otherwise you can't do it. I mean, do you know what I mean? This is where a bit of information is useful, isn't it? So yeah. So
and that was the one thing I did bring. So I had all the birth certificates. I had, by that time I'd opened a bank account. Before we moved, we opened a bank account with Crédit Agricole Britline, right? So you can do that. Had that. I had proof of address, and I asked the landlady if we could have, or maybe that was a later date, but we had an electricity bill in our name. We asked for one bill in our name, because that's really important to show, proof of residency.
Yeah.
Turned up to the town hall, spoke to the lady and said, just arrived, can my children go to school? And she's like cursing under her breath, because she's photocopying all these dossiers, these documents and whatever for the school. And she's like, but it's so late. Of course you did. And she said, you need to go to the school because the teachers are there today. So it was like an inset day. So we trundled off to the school, and I, knocked on the door.
We being you with 3 kids walking with you, presumably.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you can leave them in the flat.
No. So they all came with me. And I said, so I met the directrice. Bonjour, madame.
And pardon me, but at this stage, were the kids aware that we're going to go and see the school we're going to go to, and mommy's going to see if we can get in? I mean, they got
it. They got it.
As the nature of the.
They did.
Was this fun for them at this time? Is this a bit of a laugh, or were they a bit worried?
Gosh, were they worried? There was never any sense at that point of them being worried. I think it was all, I was creating an adventure. Like it was like everything was an adventure.
They knew it was atypical,
and it's only 2 days.
Yeah.
So we've only been there 2 days. So like everything was new.
Yeah.
Let's discover the skate park, or let's walking in vineyards. These are things that we, I'd never hadn't experienced that living in France, because Montpellier is in the city. Yeah. So, you've got and the vines were about to be picked. So all the grapes are ready.
Fabulous.
And
fabulous.
And the heat, and it was just a real novelty.
Yeah.
There was no fear at this point.
Yeah.
So then I rock up at the school, and the directrice, I'm explaining to her that I've arrived yesterday, and I've got 3 children, and can they start school here? And she was just a bit like, and she said, what level French do they have? And I said, 0. Nothing. They don't speak any French. And she said, oh. I said, surely you encountered this before? And she said, no, because it's a small village.
Yeah, because it's a small. So let's obviously, so to people watching this from, I don't particularly think this would be particularly hugely obvious in a lot of American locations, possibly Hispanic language things. But to a lot of Brits, we are aware, because of the way immigration is working, that there are kids who suddenly turn up without other languages, and particularly those sort of in the southeast. And we see that in London quite a lot. And one of the complaints of anybody on a language learning level is, when this is for adult immersion as well as children, is when there are too many people from other backgrounds coming in one go, you don't quite get the exposure to the purity of sort of a language. And so what a lot of people that could go, I'm going to go and live in London, I'm going to go and do a gap year. And this is why, and I really have to say this, and this is why I really have to stress, although Montpellier is obviously very cosmopolitan, international, whatever, but it is France. And as much as nobody loves Paris more than I do, you know, I went to sort of ballet school there, all of this business, but there is this obsession, particularly the whole like American in Paris thing. I'm going to go and spend a year abroad, I'm going to go to Paris. And I just absolutely say to people, go somewhere else, because you can quite happily culturally survive in Paris without learning French properly. The ability to socially penetrate certain niche social groups is not quite as easy. On a schooling level, you will be with kids, and your kids will be with kids who have got other languages going on as well. So what you're going to hear, I mean, obviously they are fabulously intelligent children. They've obviously got, you know, very musical, you know, orally aware parents that you're going to hear about for these kids. They've done really well with the language, but if you really want to give yourself or your kids the best chance, if you go into France for linguistic purposes or even social purposes, I do think stay away from Paris, because I just think your kids will be the one. Don't go to the Dordogne, but apart from that, your kids will be like the one or the two kid in the class that's got that language thing, and then they join in and they have to sink or swim. So I think that's a really cool thing. That's really So go on then. So what? Tell me about their first day at school. So how did it all go down?
So anyway, so the teacher then said, you know, where's your dossier? So I gave her all the documents, and she's photocopying them all, and she said, okay, well, they start tomorrow at 8:30. So then at that point, the kids were really taken aback, because I think they expected to have a holiday before they went to school.
They were like, yeah, this is the summer holidays. This is a bit like
my holiday. So anyway, the next day we rocked up, and they were okay, because they didn't understand yet what it was going to be like. So they went in very happily. Yeah, that's in fact the first week everything was good, and they were a novelty. So everybody wanted to know, you know, les Anglais who just arrived, and because my children are all white, they're blonde, and we're in the south of France where there's this, like, you know, swarthy Latino look.
Yeah,
they look like little angels, you know, with their white hair. So they really stood out. But there's a novelty of, you know, the first week. And then obviously we were in an Airbnb the first week, and then at the weekend we had to be in a different Airbnb, and we went to Metz. So I thought, well, I'll take them to the sea. And that will be, you know, the whole week we'll go to the sea at the weekend. Don't worry, kids. And of course I didn't have any transport to get to the sea. But in fact, I'd even booked the accommodation to get to the sea, and I had no idea how I was going to get there. And because, you know, it's not like you can really get a bus, or if you do get a bus, you have to drive to the village, another village, to get the bus. Anyway, it turned out that the landlady's husband ended up driving us to Metz. Such a lovely guy. He drove us there on the Friday after school and picked us up on the Monday morning. I mean, so kind. So we had 2 nights in Metz. In fact, 3 nights in Metz. Came back to school for the second week, and Douglas, one of the boys, the twins, so he was 7, he refused to go into school. He said, I'm not going.
Novelty had worn off.
Novelty had worn off. And I just said, and by this time, of course, I had all the bags. So because it was so, you know, the 2 weeks that I'm here with the children, I'm literally like a bag lady. I've got all the bags that I'm taking between these Airbnbs. So I've got the bags outside school. And Douglas said, I'm not going in. I said, Douglas, you have to go in. I have no accommodation yet. I don't check in until, you know, 12 o'clock or something. And you cannot be outside here in this heat. The safest place for you is in that school, because there's shade. I said, honestly, Douglas, I'm begging you, please. And, you know, Douglas is quite a big lad. I couldn't literally physically carry him and put him in. Anyway, he was really upset going in, and that broke my heart, because I thought, what the hell am I doing? This is just madness. This is crazy.
Really, to the point that you thought the decision might have been the wrong decision at this stage? Or?
Yeah, at that point I thought, fuck, this is really bad. And then what? Then I checked into the accommodation and I picked up the boys. I picked up the children at lunchtime, and that accommodation had a pool, right? So it had this like plunge pool thing. So again, that was a bit of I'm just all the time trying to distract the pain in order for a bit of, you know, oh, look, we've got a pool today, and oh, and the market's on tomorrow. Just trying to take them out of this situation.
While dealing with your own emotional second guessing and missing your husband and you know, what am I doing? And
and all of that. So and dealing with, you know, and then of course they're getting homework, trying to navigate that.
Yeah.
You know, it took a whole year. I didn't realize this, but it was only because Roisin had a whole year, and I didn't understand that in these, it's all about grammar. It's all about the grammar. So they have these grammar sheets that they have to learn. And I didn't realize until the end of Roisin's year that there were QR codes with little videos that teach you. Nobody told me. No. I was totally clueless. So anyway, I would say by December, the kids would then say, in hindsight, by December, the kids felt that they could integrate. And they had this, because they were all at the same school together. Now Roisin's in a different school, but because they couldn't speak the language. So what they did, and this is just how amazing kids are, they observed the games in the playground. So when the children were playing, they observed the games. And then when they came home, between the three of them, they would try to figure out the rules of the games by what they'd observed, So then Roisin would say, oh, well, I think it's a bit like bulldog, or it's a bit like stuck in the mud, but they call it Lou. And I'd say, well, that means wolf, you know. And then I think these are the rules. And so between them, they developed these rules of play that they could then go in and join in.
So if we just talk academically and linguistically for a moment, so here's a couple of other things as well that I think are really interesting, is as you told me, and it wasn't until you said this at the end of telling me then, I was just gobsmacked, because so we are, to remind ourselves, talking about a period of history where the children they were hanging out with were wearing masks. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah.
Everybody, even the teachers.
Yeah, so when you look at the methodology, which is what I always say, particularly to French, which is very, 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 you know, specific to French, is to not obsess about this consonant movement, and that the more you can break away from that and get onto the whole hon quality. So in other words, how fabulous. And I'm sure there's people watching who are like both jealous of the opportunity that these children have had and also like incredibly impressed. Well, they've done this purely on the sound rather than the, you know, the lip reading. Fine, they've got a very musically talented pair of parents who, you know, got that on both sides, you know, DNA wise, if that's something you want to, you know, consider. You know, they're both, the kids are all musicians, but that in itself really, really impressive. So it's like, but what within the school happened, or was it just the kids will just join in? So were you endeavouring to give them extra activities to teach them French? Were you in an evening saying, you know, do you want to look at this material? Do you know what these words mean? Was there any form of like teaching assistance within the class because they were by definition second language French? Or was it just basically you sit there, you observe the class? Were any of the institutrices like altering a class or giving them something to do to help them with the language acquisition? Or was it just literally turn up, shut up, learn the French? How did that go down?
Okay, so for the boys, I asked the boys to be put down a year. And I think it was really important because they were then learning to read at the same time as the French children.
Yeah.
So their phonetic language learning is incredible. They can look at a word and pronounce it because they know all the things that they've been taught. Like we were taught in school reading in English, you know.
Yeah.
So it's literally the letters and the accent, aigu, and, you know, they understand how it will sound from that. And it's incredible. Yeah. So they now pull me up on my pronunciation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get that. Imagine, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
which is what I would say about this focus on the vowel and the twang and the tone, rather than it's basically, without oversimplifying, skeletally, in English, we will go from consonant to consonant, and we are taught, you know, k, appa, cap, atta, bat.
Yeah.
But this French interest on the vowels, interesting, so interesting for kids who,
It's,
pick that
and
up.
so for Roisin, she was in her last year of primary. So as a language learner, very different. So she's then trying to, her way of learning, because of the French is all about learning by rote.
Yeah.
They learn poesies. So the boys have to do a poem every 2 weeks, and they have to learn it by heart and be able to recite it. Now, at the beginning, they found it really hard, and now it's incredible. It's obviously a muscle that they've learned to use, but it will take them maybe half an hour to learn a 2-page poem in French. And
this is absolutely, for people watching, to explain this. So unless you literally follow a child in the French primary and elementary sort of, you know, education system, there is so much copy paste. So there are downsides to that. So when you get to, for all weirdly, France is a very sort of, you know, existential philosophy, Foucault, this whole kind of like Saint-Germain kind of culture, there's not within a lot of humanities education at secondary level the whole, what do you think of this book and tell us your opinion. There's very much kind of like, this is what the book is, let's learn the history of this, whatever. Critical and analytical essays are not quite the same. If you ask your average British kid what they think of a book, they could write you an essay. We made a very strong decision in the 60s deliberately to factor out grammar teaching within the UK. Similar decisions were taken in Australia and America around the same time, and to focus on more English literature and people to have an opinion. So if you ask your average 18-year-old who's doing English for A-level, they're fairly gobby and can say why they like the book. Often when you then get somebody who's been through the French education and say, what do you think of the book? They'll tell you, as you say, where Molière was born, what was going on in France at the time of the book, what that's supposed to represent. So there's good sides and downsides, but upsides, but at the same time, French kids are super hot on copy paste. And as I say, as a linguist, you just need to train the muscle to listen and repeat, regardless of the analysis of it. And I think that's fabulous. And I just think, as Fiona's very articulately put, it is like a muscle, you know, and you just learn to, you know, to hear that sound and repeat that sound, often without questioning it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and memorizing. So with Roisin, she would, I mean, history, again, the history that they learn is very boring because it's just all French history. And all about the kings and the dates. And you just, no context. It's just like literally.
No, do you think this was a good decision? No, what would have happened if this hadn't happened?
Nothing like that.
No.
But because it was that kind of learning, she would be able to memorize it and be getting, you know, 18 out of 20.
Yes, completely. Exactly. If you are good at that, you can ace school in France. If you're the sort of articulate kid who might be a little bit dyslexic, who might not be visually cunning with a whole page of data, but if you ask someone, what do you think about this decision and why do you think this led to the Second World War and what could Germany have done to avoid this and whatever, and they have the analytical ability to do that, often you do fall short in the French system, which is something to note. And as long as you're aware of that as a parent, you know, and that's not generalizing, but that really is based on quite a lot of experience. It's really important that you've said that. So when do you think, so tell me about the moment when, tell me about this business with Roisin, who's obviously very talented as a musician, about the possibility of going back, and then you were told, no, mommy, we don't want that.
So during the year, we had missed the opportunity to do the 11 plus because they changed the date, and then we came to France and we couldn't fly back because of COVID. And
pardon me interrupting, 11 plus for anybody American. So basically at the hour, so obviously our education, our primary education will finish at 11, primary being as in up to the age of about 10, 11, and then secondary school education, so middle school and then, you know, middle school, high school. There used to be on a state level, on a national level, an exam called the 11 plus, which would decide whether you went to a grammar school, which is basically a higher academic level school, which was not fee paying, or even some private schools have an exam, an entrance exam, which still roughly takes place around the same time. You have to apply privately to go to those schools. So a lot of fee-paying schools have this entrance exam, but it can be life-changing if you get in, and often there'll be scholarships, there'll be bursaries, there'll be various things available. So this is the exam that kids will take to decide where they're going for an education after 11, which is very important often.
Yeah. So we'd missed the 11 plus. So the only option was the private entrance to an independent school on a music scholarship. So we were then working with her towards this audition that happened on Zoom. And that took place, and she even did a test. You do an entrance exam online, and it was just all bonkers. When you think back, the world was crazy.
And pardon me interrupting, had you carried on the English education? Had you made sure they were still reading books in English, or had you just gone, do you know what, they've got enough going on? Had you sort of done a bit
No, well, for Roisin, not for the boys, but for Roisin, she carried on doing her 11 plus tuition, books or whatever, she would carry on doing that.
Yeah, okay.
So then she did this audition and entrance exam, and she passed them. And then I think in about May, I received a letter. And in the letter it said, congratulations, you've been awarded a scholarship, the music scholarship, to start in September. So we were delighted, obviously. Well, I was delighted. And just because we thought that's what we were going to do, that was the plan initially, that was what she wanted, we thought. And so
let's be very clear, you come from a very musical family, obviously brother, bless him. Other people, your own, the Irish musical cultural thing is enormous within you. Your husband, his mother is also a professional musician, wasn't she? So this is a very established route for your family that we're going to talk about how you're breaking away from, because so Matt is a professional musician, his mother is. So it seemed obvious and apparent that Roisin would go and do this. So what happened?
Well, also it was a way, it was a next step that wasn't a backward step.
No.
So that was the thing, like a great white shark, constantly moving forward. Okay, just moving forward, whatever pace needs to be.
Whatever the pace needs to be. Fabulous, fabulous advice.
Then I went to the school to pick Roisin up, and I handed her the letter that said congratulations, and she read it, and she just started crying and said,
"Oh, baby girl,
I don't want to go. I want to stay in France." So, could not believe it. So we thought, oh, okay, that was wasn't expecting that. Right, let's see what everyone else wants to do, shall we? So, had a bit of a chat with the boys and Matt, and all kind of weighing up the odds of what we wanted to do. And are you sure you want to turn this place down, Roisin? And you've worked really hard for this and you've got it. And she said, no, I don't want it. I want to stay here. So then we decided to stay for another year. That was the next idea. Okay, we'll stay for one more year.
Yeah.
And we had tenants renting our house, and they were happy to stay on. So it was all good. But in the meantime, because we were renting a holiday home, we had to be out by the end of June, because then it goes to peak rentals in July and August. So we then had to move again. We had to pack up and move again. I mean, in 3 years, just put in context, in 3 years, we moved 8 times. Okay, and 2 of those moves were in England.
And so now, having made yourself part of this village socially as a parent and all of this business, and a lot of the time, and I'd be interested to hear what you think about this. This is not criticizing anybody personally, but an observation that I get from a lot of young parents is that particularly the mums, is there's not necessarily the same whole, oh, hi Sue at the school gate, affinity, allegiance sort of between, the parents. School is seen as school. It's like a rite of passage for the kids. You don't often even get parents, as I think often won't even go to parents' evening. And there's often a lot of the parents say, oh, we really wanted to be part of a community and we achieved that, but it wasn't weirdly through school. So maybe if kids come round or they go to events, but there's not the same sort of like moms at the school gate sort of affinity they find in France. But that said, when you then had to look at moving and you decided to stay for another year, what did this feel like? Somebody in England who was moving house, but who would obviously stay in the same region, were your hearts, other than your schools and your kids' schools, were your hearts in this town at this point?
So we really wanted to stay in the same village, but we couldn't find, because we weren't part of the French system, we couldn't ever rent in France. Okay.
No.
Our only options were to rent a holiday gîte for the 10 months
Yeah.
or buy a house. And because we had a house in England, all our money was tied up there.
Yeah.
So there was no other rental in the village. So we ended up going to the next village, which is only, whatever, 7-minute drive. But then the boys didn't want to change primary schools, which is fine. So we were then driving back and forth to take the boys, you know, to school, which is fine. And then she's then started college, secondary school, and that was in the village we were living in. So she could then walk to school.
Brilliant.
So that worked for another 10 months, you know, so we're there for another 10 months. And I would say the community thing, because the boys, in particular the boys, because there were twins and boys like play, you know, they like playing football, playing rugby. They're very sociable. So I think they very quickly had a network of friends that then the parents then included me in it. You know, so they're always inviting them over, then I'd invite them back, and
play date thing. Yeah.
And there are no, I don't know what it's like in America, but there are no, there's not the same thing as keeping up with the Joneses.
No.
Is that an international expression?
Yeah.
Okay, so that doesn't exist in France, and I'm sure that's because there was a revolution. You know, there is no hierarchy, so that means that in this village school there are lots of winemakers, there are lots of farmers that own vines, that pick the vines. There are people that work in Cave cooperative, you know, in the region, so they're all making wine together, whatever. Then you've got dentists and lawyers and business people and holistics. There's an absolute mixture of all professions. Not only that, so then obviously you've got Matt, who's an international cellist and opera singer, but you've also got the drummer for the Gypsy Kings.
For the Gypsy Kings?
Yes! Quentin Bourset, his name is, and he's a drummer for the Gypsy Kings.
Shit.
He's also a parent in the school.
Shit me.
Honestly. And then you've got a filmmaker, Silver, who's doing a film this year. You know, that's his. You've got dancers. It's an absolute mélange. It's a melting pot of different personalities, different jobs, different people. And that I've never experienced that in my life.
No. And do you think that's specific to the area?
No, I think it's specific to France.
To France.
Because you have the free schools, the public schools, yeah? Then you have the private schools, and the people that go to the private schools, the children that go to the private schools are children that cannot deal with mainstream learning. Yeah. So that's children that would have dyslexia or autism, so, you know, ADHD. Those kids go there, and it's not expensive. It's maybe €1,000 a year. I mean, it's like, you know, there's no, and then you have international schools, and that's your 38 grand a year schools.
Yeah, diplomats' kids and all of that.
Yeah. So it's, you know, it's égalité. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us quickly about your teaching experience and how that came about, because that is really interesting.
So during COVID, so when COVID hit, and obviously I've been furloughed and then lost my job, I thought, okay, what can I do? So I did a TEFL language learning course. And
so that's teaching English as a foreign language.
Teaching as a foreign language. And then when we moved to France, I got a job with a company called Wales English. So as in Wales, the Wales, not the country, Wales the animal. Okay, and I was teaching English to children in China. And so it was 2,000 teachers employed by this company. And that went great. It was going really well until the Chinese government decided overnight that they were going to put an end to any outside teaching coming into China. So we all lost our jobs.
So once again, Fifi finds herself adversity.
So that happened. And then I went to Roisin's parents' evening. And I chatted to her prof principal, it's like a form tutor. And obviously our situation is quite unique, so people are quite curious. And I said, you know, I was teaching here, but now I'm not. I'm looking for a job. And then I received an email to say, why don't you send your CV to this address? There was no, and the address was not obvious. It was a snail mail, you know, postal mail address. So I printed off my CV and sent it in. And then I got a phone call a couple of months later saying, Madame, we've got a job for you. And because I'd applied for loads of jobs, I couldn't quite remember what job I'd applied for. And I said, I'm really sorry, can you just, you know, specify? And it was to teach in a lycée, so age 16 to 18, in Béziers. So Béziers is a town near here that has a variety of issues. And could I start on Monday? And I just said, well,
Things happen quickly in fees world, don't they, people?
I know. I'm not actually a qualified teacher. Oh, it doesn't matter, madame, you're English. It's like, okay. So they hadn't had a teacher for 2 years. Okay. And that's because, well, if you're a civil servant in France, you're very protected. So if you're sick, you just get full pay, basically.
Yes, totally.
So I rocked up the following Monday, and it was the most challenging thing I've ever done. So I did it from January to the end of the year, taught 37 kids at a time in a class, ranging between the ages of 16 to 18, all wearing masks still.
Yeah.
And experienced, racism. A guy threw a stone out of a window. It turns out that the school has had a teacher that's commit suicide every single year since 2020 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was a massive challenge, and I survived to tell the story.
I mean, let's basically put this into a bit of background context for people. We're not saying that the French school system is not a great place for your kids if you're potentially looking at moving. There is so there's also a sort of polemic issue sort of at the moment, actually, with there's a female politician, or a politician I should say, in France, who's sort of commented on the public versus the private school system in a way which a couple of people have found offensive. There is a staff shortage in a lot of areas of schooling in France, and for all we've spoken about the paperwork dependent heavy paperasse in France, schools have chilled out and lightened up when it comes to the hiring because there's a need, and this has been a route in for a lot of talented people. So if you're watching my channel because your kind of background is education, and there are ways into so you used to traditionally to go and teach English. So there are various routes into working in France with English. If you're doing a degree, and whether or not you're part of the Erasmus system, you can often go and be a teaching assistant, which is fine. That's just basically, we'll plonk you in a classroom and you can basically, someone else will kind of decide what's going on for the year academically, but you'll basically have one-on-one or one-on-group sessions, and you're basically there as a language assistant, which is very doable. Often there are paid roles doing this. I teach people who are really, really decent. Nathan in the Monday group does this, whatever, and you can get out of that effectively. It doesn't just have to be the Erasmus situation. You can keep going doing that. Then there are people who go through the CAPES route, which is basically the French diplômé d'état, qualified English teacher. You don't often have the most invigorated, motivated people. I've got a very lovely friend, I shan't mention her name. She lives in Besançon. She does this. She was a language teacher. And she just, again, so she's living in France. She's got a French husband, English girl. And she just fell out of love with this sort of public school system. And so there is a little bit of that. And with all due respect, language teaching, and I'm not ruling out a few great individuals that I've come across, but language teaching as a whole, really, to be fair, without being unfair, a little bit like secondary language teaching, you know, in the UK or America, it depends who you land with. It's not always the best. And so I would always say this to anybody that's learning a language as an adult, is don't base it on your experiences in learning language as a younger person. And so Fee, as you can tell, is obviously dynamic, attractive, motivated, you know, intelligent. you know, would throw everything at this. But even she was like, yeah, do you know what? I don't want to make a career out of this. So that is just the thing worth expressing. If you are looking at moving to commodities your English language ability, and you think, right, I'd like to do the teaching, then look into possible alternative routes, such as working with adults, such as, you know, what can you do with that industry? So if we sort of talk a little bit to finish about what you've now got with this flat and what is available with that, because that's basically where you're now at. So you bought a main family home.
So so basically, when we sold the house in England, we wanted to live in Co, because that's where the children were at school. But our daughter is part of, so this is another opportunity that never would have come out of living in England. She's part of the opera house in Montpellier. Okay, so we were commuting every Saturday, 9 to 1. She rehearses. She's actually doing La Boheme within the children's choir. So with professionals, I know. So she's there every Saturday, and then a week every single half term. So they always have 2 weeks. So it's a whole week of February. In fact, for April, it's 2 weeks. So it's really intense. So we have been hiring Airbnbs in Montpellier for this purpose, rather than driving back and forth. So when we sold the house in England, we thought it made sense to have a place, a pied-à-terre in Montpellier, and have the house in Coast where the children are going to school. So we've got that city country thing going on. So we bought the flat in Montpellier in March and did it up, and that's available for rent.
And it is beautiful. It is really lovely.
It's perfect. It's a 2-bedroom, 50-meter square, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, there's separate toilets, really nice kitchen, really light and airy, and 300 meters from Place de la Comédie, which is the main, if you see any pictures of Montpellier, it will be that place. 300 meters from there, 500 meters from the main train station. So it's a brilliant location right in the heart of loads of restaurants, but actually it's still very quiet. So you don't get, it's kind of 2 roads away from the bars. So you don't actually hear them. And it's our little city break. So for example, Roisin and I are going tonight after school, and we're going to stay there till Sunday because she's.
And so how long does it take you to get there from where you live?
Well, so if we drive, it's 50 minutes, but I'm going to go get the bus because Matt's going to drive up tomorrow with the boys, and Roisin's got a piano lesson, and the bus goes past Montagnac. So we'll jump on the bus, and that takes probably 50 minutes from Montagnac.
Yeah.
So, and then the idea is, so that apartment, we call it Artist Apartment Montpellier. And then with the house, we have a house and a gîte. So we're doing up the gîte, and that's called Artist Gîte Co. So that's a 51 meter squared, 2 bedrooms, much more open plan. And that's connected to the side of this house. So it'll be an independent living area. And the house that we bought here is an old winemaker's house. So you've got that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, stunning. 24 steps up and then 2 floors on top.
So if somebody were wanting to spend some time in France, and this is what I always stress, so people always say to me, Luke, can you recommend a language course, residential, in France? And I always say, whilst they exist, by definition of you doing them, you are going to be with everybody else who's non-French first language. So if you look at the success of these kids and this sponging of proper decent French, I'm a massive believer that you'd be better saying, what is a hobby? Do you horse ride? Do you do ballet? Do you do football? Do you do rock climbing? Do you do sailing? Go and sign up to some form of a course as an adult with other French people and learn that way and spend time that way. But equally, if you wanted the security of living somewhere where there is somebody, so either at the gîte, either at the apartment, and you've got somebody who's there on the phone or even in person who can kind of guide you with this. Even if, you were looking, and really I would literally suggest to somebody, if they go, well, what should I do as a program? So I've got people who've done this in loads of cities, Besançon for one, and I've said, don't go and do the sign up thing, don't go and do this, don't go and do a language course. So what they've done, and it's gone successfully well. So there's various applications like, on va sortir, we're going to go out and all of this business. So you can literally go find yourself somewhere to live and go to a walking group at 11 o'clock in the morning with loads of local French people. A lot of the time they will be retired, but that's great because they're chatty older women.
Yeah.
You can go for a lunch meet to talk about whatever, some form of book or something, again with the same people. You will often be invited for drinks and coffee with that kind of thing, which is not always the first. French people are a little bit on the back foot about that sometimes. You can then go on your app again and you can see, oh, there's a whatever rock and roll class, this, the other. So in other words, if you went and got Fee's apartment and you stayed there and you're safe and your money is, you know what you're getting and you can see where you're going to stay and you've got access to all these great things and this transport, you've got the comfort, a whole life could be organized for you, other than I'm going to pay a massive amount of money to a language school, or I'm going to, and this is the thing I have to really, really stress to be careful about people, be very careful of host families, because host families can be here and they can be here.
Yeah.
So sometimes host families, they'll be like, oh, you know, you get to eat with us and whatever, but you're paying a great deal of money for a fairly dingy spare bedroom to basically have an hour with the family at dinner, or not. Dad might not be back. A lot of the time I know people who've done host family situations where the dad is not even back from work, and or you're not expected to eat with the parents, you expect to eat with the kids, which when you're like a 52-year-old woman who's traveling to France to learn a language makes you feel a little bit relegated. So in other words, if you could instead go and spend some time in a flat which is gorgeous and safe, where you've got local stuff going on and you can make your life that way, I can't recommend somewhere like Montpellier and Fee's flat more, quite frankly. Do you know what I mean? I really think it's the way to do it.
And it's also by the sea.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, we can all be, what's the word? We can all be very well motivated, but sometimes you just want a holiday and stay somewhere really nice.
I know.
You know? So guys, if you have any more questions, if there's anything else you want to know, the website is there, or by all means, you know, just write some questions underneath and obviously, you know, Fee can respond. But, you know, to take from this, it is doable, it is achievable, it can be great fun. Fiona obviously doesn't regret this decision. You know, if you're learning French for your own academic development, if you're learning it as a hobby, if you've got like a little coup de coeur, you've got a little bit of passion for it from something else in your youth, that's all great. But why not use your French? Why not go abroad? Like I said, nobody's a bigger fan of Paris than I am, but it's not always the way. It's incredibly expensive. Let's be realistic as well. Options like this are there. Fee's gorgeous, as you can see and hear, and so if you want somebody, and again, you know, if you, so the cost of an immersive lessons style program where you sit in a classroom with everybody else, none of whom is first language French, you will have some form of accommodation provided. I know people who have paid upwards of £2,000 a week for that, and they'll announce with great fanfare, oh, I'm off to go and do a French intensive course, and the results are just nothing. And the teaching, with all due respect, and I don't mean this rudely, is often very much still people qualified to teach French as a foreign language in France are pretty much copy pasting this copy paste grammar method from, you know, from the French school system. And I don't mean that critically, but that is what I hear. You know, a lot of the time TEFL teachers teaching English as a foreign language are a little bit more dynamic, but the French system to teach foreigners French, I'll be honest, hasn't really got the same joie de vivre. And I'm really saying that from experience. It's not worth doing in that way. Learn the grammar, get the podcasts, get your basics down, and then go and stay with Fee. Go and sit in a cafe at the end of the road, ensconce yourself in a chair at the bar, talk to the little chap with the kepi on and sort of ask him why he's there. You know, that is the way to do it. Go and sit in the church, go to a local whatever, go to a local whatever meeting of anything, you know. So this is really, really, really the way to do it. Do not be drawn in to the sort of false lure of the headlights of the traditional
safety.
Yeah, it's just not worth it. So anyway, any questions you've got for Fee, by all means write in the comments. You can obviously choose to respond, or you can contact her directly. I cannot recommend a safer pair of hands. I think you can see she's got motivation, you know, coming out of her. You know, how nice to hear of a success story. And life isn't always easy. Life isn't always obvious, be it for people, be it for language, be it for whatever. And you do have moments of, why am I doing this? But you've now got somebody who's made such a success, and I think we can all agree that is so impressive over COVID as well. Let's talk.
I know, it's mad.
You know, so whatever. Have a browse at the pictures underneath, guys. It is absolutely gorgeous. All you need to do is just Google images Montpellier. So I'm not going to you know, patronize you and pop that link underneath, but you know, just type that into Google Images and be wowed. It is a beautiful, 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 you know, beautiful, beautiful area. Fee, thank you very, very much. All right.
Nice to speak.
All my love, all my love, all my love.
Bye. Bye.